Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I'm here to bring you a good old-fashioned book haul. For the most part, these are books that I bought myself, either on a discount site or in a used bookstore. I also have a gift and a lot of review copies. In terms of genre, we got adult horror, thrillers, science fiction, and fantasy, which is representative of the four main genres I read on my channel. If that sounds good, hopefully you stick around. If you're new, consider subscribing. Otherwise, let's get started. So first, let's talk about the books that I bought myself, because I always find that the most interesting in book hauls is finding out where booktubers actually spend their own money. And so starting with the science fiction book I picked up at a used bookstore, I have A Fire Upon the Deep by Vernon Beach, and this is an epic space opera book. I know at least one subscriber is going to be really excited to see this because he's recommended this book to me a few times, and I've also seen this book on a few best science fiction of all time lists. I know for those of you that follow Moyd's channel, I know this is always in his top 3 depending on which version of his lists you watch, and so I've been really eager to check this one out for myself. It's kind of a, well, semi-modern classic of the space opera genre, and I've heard great things, and yeah, I'm just really hopeful I'm gonna like it, because that's the theme in this book haul. Is the books I bought myself are actually books that I have not read yet, which breaks my own book buying rule. I typically force myself to wait until I have read the book, and then I only buy my favorites, but there's a few books that were just on really good sales, really good deals. This one was only $4.50, and so I decided to pick it up believing that it was going to become a favorite, and so I decided to beat myself to the punch and buy it before I read it, so hopefully I don't disappoint myself. Sticking with science fiction, I also picked up a copy of Wool by Hugh Howey. This I got from bookoutlet.com, and I gotta say that I'm very excited to check out this dystopian story. My understanding is that it's set in a future where the air has become toxic, and so everyone needs to stay inside in these silos in order to survive. If someone does something wrong, they are sent out to clean the outside of the silos using wool, and it's believed to be a death sentence. They're not supposed to come back. I've heard just such good things about this book. Pretty much everyone loves it. I believe it has some twists and turns. I don't normally like dystopian post-apocalyptic fiction, but I have a feeling that this one's going to be something special. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm so eager to check it out. I would love to know, are the other books as good? I just bought the first one. I didn't want to go all out crazy, but I don't know if this one works as a standalone or if I should consider picking up the last 2 books in the trilogy. Then I picked up Ancestral Nights by Elizabeth Bear. This is the first book in her White Space series, and I don't know actually too much about it now that I'm saying that, but I know it involves a salvage mission where they find some ancient technology. I actually read the second book in her series, Machine, last year and really liked it. It was only a companion novel, so I was able to start there, but I would like to go back to the original book in the series. I know a few other reviewers, like Rachel from Colonnati, really enjoyed this one. We sometimes have similar tastes, and I'm just looking for that hard science fiction space opera, and yeah, I was just really excited. This one was $8 on Book Outlet, so I couldn't really say no. Now, switching over to fantasy, I picked up a book I didn't know a whole lot about, which usually is something I shouldn't do, but I'm hoping it'll work this time. That book is The Lights of Prague by Nicole Jarvis. This, I understand, is an urban fantasy set in Prague in a world where there are vampires. The story is also supposed to be really queer. I believe that while it has vampire, it is more fantasy than horror. I don't believe it's going to be super dark and scary, but I'm hoping it's a little bit dark. And for whatever reason, it just sounds really good. Normally, I prefer more epic fantasy, but I'm hoping that this will give me similar vibes to the book I read earlier this year, Shadow of the Short Days, which I loved. And so I'm kind of interested in trying more otherworld urban fantasy, and I'm just hoping I will love it. So yeah, I don't know, it's a beautiful cover. I kind of got a little bit of a cover buy here, but I did a bit of research, and I'm hoping again that it won't disappoint me. Next, I also picked up a copy of Under Heaven by Guy Gabriel Kay, and this is my first book by this author. I'm hoping this is a good place to start. I believe this is a fantasy book with very little in terms of magical elements. It's kind of fantasy because it's a historical setting, but it's set in kind of a secondary world, a reinterpretation of historical events in, I believe, China. And I am just really excited for this because if you don't know, I love Asian inspired fantasy stories, and so I pretty much want to pick up all of them. While I have the physical book, I'm tempted to do this on audio because I know the audio is narrated by Simon Vance. And yeah, I'm hoping this one is good. I've also kind of looked at Tagana, but I think that this one will more appeal to me, again with that kind of Chinese angle. I think it will be a little bit less classic, or at least again have that classic twist on it that will, you know, hopefully draw me into the story, because it's quite long, but beautiful cover. Again, what have I done? I've turned myself into a cover by person. I don't know what I'm gonna do. From there, I picked up a couple books in a series I was already reading. The first book I already owned is The Trade of Baru Cormorant by Seth Dickinson, and this follows a woman who, when she was a child, a neighboring country came in and took over her nation, and there was a cultural stripping of everything that she knew. Her family was torn apart, and she is left very angry. And so in seeking revenge, she decides to take down this empire from the inside out. She becomes an accountant and tries to manipulate and work her way through the system in order to do some good damage. This book is very slow paced, very dry, has so much economics, but I kind of loved it. And so on Book Outlet, when I saw the second two books, which again have beautiful covers, but I swear that's not why I picked them up, I also got the Monster Baru Cormorant, and then the third book is the Tyrant Baru Cormorant. I have not read either of the sequels yet, and there I believe is going to be a fourth and final book coming out probably either end of next year or even the year after, so I want to be caught up, so that'll be ready for when the series all finishes up. And yeah, I'm excited for that for sure. And I got two more books at my used bookstore, the first one being Perdido Street Station by China Mieville, and the second one is a companion book in the same series called Scar. And I picked up these two books because I heard Thomas from SFF 180 talk about them in his favorites list, and I'm basically reading through every book that he put up in that video there. But these are described as a weird, dark fantasy. I understand they're not horror. He was very clear about that when I was talking to him about it. But instead, it's set in a secondary world in this grimy, dark city, at least the first book is. And there are beings that are not humans. They're almost like insect-like, and it just sounds really bizarre. I've heard amazing things about it, and I'm very excited to give it a try. The second book, without spoiling anything, is more of a companion book, but I understand it involves sea travel, so it's set out on an ocean brigade or something, so I'm excited for that as well. I would have liked to have the covers match, but I am also not super picky, honestly. I talk about being a cover by reader, but honestly, I'm more here for the stories. And I've heard better things about Perdido Street Station, so I was happier to get the really nice, big, floppy trade back. And I've heard lesser things about this one, so I was okay just getting the mass market paperback. If I really love it, if it's an all-time favorite, I could always rebuy it. It was fairly cheap because of the size of this book at the used bookstore, so wasn't too worried about that. Next, I want to talk about books I received for gifts, and I have one this month that came from my Amazon wish list, and that was a bit of a semi-surprise. Basically, I had a subscriber reach out to me via Instagram. He was looking for some personalized book recommendations based off of some of the horror books he had read and loved recently. I did my best to give him recommendations. I hope they turned out, but he said in thanks for that, he was going to send me a book from my wish list. And I was very thankful, but honestly, I never know if someone actually means that when they say it. But it was a wonderful surprise when the book showed up at my P.O. box, and I was very grateful for that. Raymond doesn't have a booktube account. He's actually a photographer on Instagram, so I will link that down below if you want to check out some beautiful photography. He definitely has talent and good taste in books too. So the book that he sent me off my wish list was one I was very excited about. This is The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne, which I just recently read and reviewed on my channel. It's an epic Norse-inspired story that is set in this fantastical world, and it's the first in a trilogy. It's in 3 points of view, and I was so excited to check it out because if you follow any fantasy booktuber on YouTube, everyone is gushing about this one. Everyone is giving it 5 stars. It was not quite a 5-star read for me, but I definitely am so glad I got the chance to read it. It is beautiful, and I am, excited to see where the series goes, so very grateful for this gift. It was very generous of him, and I gotta say, if anyone else wants personalized recommendations in exchange for books, I am easily sold. If you don't know, books are definitely my favorite online currency, so my wish list is always open in exchange for book recommendations. Let's just put that out there. And buddy reads. If you want to buddy read something that's on my wish list, just send me a copy. Even if I read it before, I will reread it with you. I'm very easily manipulated when it comes to books. Now, moving on to books that I received for review, I'm going to first talk about the thriller and horror books that I got from publishers. The first one being The 7 Visitations of Sydney Burgess by Andy Marino, and this is a book I received from Orbit Books. They put out kind of like one horror book every year around the fall season, and so I was really grateful to receive a copy. This book is possibly a take on a possession story. I already read and reviewed it, so I'm going to refer you to that video, but I'll say I didn't like it quite as much as I hoped, but I was very grateful to read it. It involves a woman who at the beginning of the story, her home is invaded by a stranger. She is attacked, something happens, she blacks out, and then the story goes from there. She continually is blacking out and has to fill in the blanks of what is happening. And it's a really cool concept. I just didn't love the execution. Another book I received for review and have already gushed about is The Silent Woods by Kimmy Cunningham Grant. I believe this is from St. Martin's Press. And this is a thriller that involves a father and daughter who are hiding out in the isolated mountainside. The father did something and needs to hide from authorities. And every year a friend comes and gives them resources and groceries and stocks them up for the winter, but their friend didn't come this year, so the plan has to change. They have to find a new way to survive, and the story goes from there. This book has all the feels of the father and daughter love that I enjoy so much in books. It's not the most complicated story, but I gotta say I had a lot of fun reading it, so I do again recommend this one. And again, I already reviewed it, but I'm giving you another mini review here. Last for thrillers and horror, we have The Stolen Hours by Alan Eskin, who, if you don't know, is one of my all-time favorite crime/thriller writers. All of his books are so different from each other, and they basically never disappoint. This one follows a lawyer who is trying to prosecute a man who has taken a woman and almost murdered her. She was found in the water, nearly drowned, and they have possibly a connection to their past, and the story just goes from there. There's the perspective of the bad guy, which I love, and it's just so well done. I, again, just will read everything he puts out at this point. He's definitely one of my favorite authors, and one that I don't talk about on my channel enough anymore, so I need to change that. Now, switching over to review copies for science fiction and fantasy, the first one I just got in the mail yesterday, and that is Escaping First Contact by T.S. Baer. And this is the first book in the Burnt Ship trilogy, and this is set in a future where I believe humans have discovered a few alien species. However, they discover a spaceship for an alien craft that they do not recognize. They do not know where it's from, so they send out a series of small crews to investigate, and the story goes from there. This is science fiction, but I understand it's science fiction horror, and that's why the author reached out to me. They saw my live stream with Thomas from SFF 180 and thought that I would really enjoy it. I am so excited to get into this. The author's also Canadian, which you know is always a bonus for me, but the content of this book sounds ridiculously fun. Definitely sounds exactly up my alley, so this should be in my next science fiction and fantasy wrap-up because this is high priority. I plan on reading it basically as soon as I finish filming this video. Next up, we have Refraction by Wick Wilker, and this is a book I've already reviewed on my channel. This is set over a couple different points of view, over a couple different timelines. We have someone back in, I believe, the 1980s who is a physicist and is trying to invent technology that will allow us to travel faster in space. However, he is hearing voices. We also have a pilot who is working on a Martian colony, and he is also hearing voices. It's the question of, are these people mentally ill? Is it psychosis, or is something else going on? I actually feel like the book almost gives away too much in the synopsis, so I like to leave it there because I went in without knowing all the details, and it was a wonderful surprise seeing how all these different timelines come together. And yeah, I just really love this book. It was so smart. I do plan on reading this book once more before I finalize my best of the year lists, because this is a 2021 release, and I have a feeling it's going to make my top 10, but it's just a question of where it's going to end up, so I'll keep you posted there. I also received a few different review copies from Tor.com. The first one is In the Watchful City, and this is a queer story set in a city following a shapeshifter. It's one of these books where it's like stories within stories, and I already reviewed this one. I liked it. I love the diverse elements. It is, once again, Asian-inspired fantasy, but the narrative was a little bit fragmented for me, so it didn't entirely work, but was very grateful to receive a review copy. The next one is one that also just showed up. I have not read it yet, and that is Elder Race by Adrian Tchaikovsky, who I think is more well known for some of his other books, like Children of Time. This is a science fiction fantasy book, so it crosses over between the two genres, following an anthropologist who is possibly a sorcerer that is going to investigate this new planet, and I'm very eager to get into this one. So this should be a book I'll review probably in November. And then I also received a finished copy of the Tenzeret series by Neon Yang, the first book being The Black Tides of Heaven. There are 4 books in this bind-up, or 4 novellas, I should say. And this is a queer, Asian-inspired fantasy story where the characters are gender fluid. In the first book, they deal with the fact that they are able to choose their gender identity, and they don't do that at birth, but they are considered to be non-binary until or if they choose to identify with a gender. And I believe the author is non-binary themselves, and so there's some really interesting conversations around that. And I'm just eager to get into these books. I've heard really good things about them. A few reviewers that share really similar opinions to me absolutely love them, so I'm very hopeful that these will just scratch that itch for that really unique fantasy that I tend to really like. And in my last book haul, you saw that my husband got me a copy of Shadow and Claw by Gene Wolfe, which is the first 2 books in the Book of the New Sun bind-up. Tor did a fantastic republishing for its Tor Essentials line, and then I was incredibly grateful that since then Tor has sent me the second bind-up, which is Sword and Citadel. I have basically binged through all 4 of these books. I understand there is that 5th book that eventually I will get to. And these are sci fantasy books. I consider them to be more fantastical, but I understand that there's a reason they get classified as science fiction. But in terms of the narrative, it really does read more like fantasy to me, just in terms of the medieval setting and all of this. And the story at the beginning follows an apprentice to a torturer, and you get to follow him at the beginning. It's almost like a coming of age story, and then the story goes from there into the larger world as he starts to explore outside of the Torturer Guild. And I don't want to say too much about it. I already reviewed it, so let's move along. Then from Rebellion, I've received a copy of Campaigns and Companions, which is a super cute, quick gift book that goes with the premise of what if our pets played D&D, what would they do, what would they say? And so in each page there is a bit of dialogue, and then there is a corresponding picture. It's a super fast read. You could easily read it all in one sitting. And again, it's not one continuing story, but just a whole bunch of little snippets. And it's really cute, it's really fun. It would make for a good gift for Christmas or something. So excited about that. And then last from Orbit, I was very excited to receive a copy of Son of the Storm, which again I already read and reviewed. This is an African-inspired fantasy story that is told over a few different points of view. There is hidden magic, forbidden magic, and these characters have to go on the run, and they meet different people, they join up, and in a way it's very classic fantasy, but in other ways it was very unique because I loved the world building. It was so detailed and so thoughtful. You have the different prejudice of people's skin tones, and it's woven into the story in a very thoughtful way. So I'm very eager to continue on with this series. Very thankful that I got to read the debut novel, and I just can't wait for more. So that is it for this video. I would love to hear down below of the books I talked about, which ones are you most excited about, or particularly which books do you want me to read for the ones I have not reviewed yet on this channel? Which ones should I prioritize? Again, if you're new to my channel, consider subscribing. I do read a lot of these genres, as you got to see, and I would love for you to stick around. If you're already subscribed, thank you so much. You can still help me out by giving this video a thumbs up, sharing it around online, and if you hit that little notification bell, you'll never miss a video from me. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.